You're not who you think you are. Not because you're faking it, not because you're lying to others, but because your brain has been systematically lying to you and you've been believing it without question. Self-deception isn't a character flaw. It's not stupidity or weakness. It's one of the most sophisticated defense mechanisms your mind possesses. And right now, as you watch this, it's probably working overtime to convince you that you're not the one who does this. That voice in your head saying, I'm pretty self-aware actually. That's it. That's the mechanism defending itself. Because here's what makes self-deception so insidious. It doesn't feel like lying. When you lie to someone else, there's usually a flicker of awareness. You know you're not telling the truth, but self-deception operates below that threshold of consciousness. It rewrites reality so seamlessly that you genuinely believe the edited version. You're not covering up the truth. You've actually convinced yourself it never existed. Let me show you how this works in real time. Think about the last time you did something that contradicted your self-image. Maybe you snapped at someone you care about. Maybe you avoided a difficult conversation. Maybe you broke a promise to yourself about changing a habit. What happened next wasn't you sitting there thinking, I'm going to lie to myself about this. What happened was automatic, instant. Your mind immediately began constructing a narrative that protected your sense of being a good, competent, in-control person. This is called cognitive dissonance reduction, and your brain does it without asking permission. Here's the formula. I'm a good person, plus I did something harmful equals intolerable psychological tension. Your mind has to resolve this conflict, but it won't do it by accepting that you're not always good. Instead, it rewrites the story. They deserved it. It wasn't that bad. I had no choice. Anyone would have done the same. Within seconds, sometimes milliseconds, your brain has chosen the narrative that preserves your self-image. And you believe it. Not because you're weak, because you're human. The mechanism gets more sophisticated from there. Motivated reasoning means you're not actually seeking truth. You're seeking confirmation of what you want to believe. Evidence gets filtered in real time. Information that supports your preferred narrative slides right in. Information that challenges it gets scrutinized, dismissed, or reframed. And here's the cruel irony. Intelligence doesn't protect you from this. It makes it worse. Smarter people aren't less prone to self-deception. They're just better at constructing elaborate justifications. They can build more sophisticated rationalizations. They can find more creative ways to dismiss contradicting evidence. You're not using your intelligence to see truth. You're using it to defend against truth. Rationalization is the tool your mind uses to make all of this feel logical. You don't remember the real reason you did something. Maybe you were tired or triggered or acting from an unconscious wound. But your mind can't tolerate, I don't know why I did that. So it invents a reason that sounds good. I'm not avoiding the gym. I'm listening to my body. I'm not jealous. I'm just concerned about the situation. I didn't interrupt because I'm rude. I interrupted because the point was important. The explanation arrives after the behavior, not before. But it feels true because you generated it. Your brain trusts its own explanations, even when they're fabricated after the fact. Self-serving bias distorts how you interpret your entire life. Success? That's your skill, your effort, your intelligence. Failure? That's bad luck, other people's incompetence, circumstances beyond your control. Your brain automatically rewrites your history to cast you as the protagonist who's doing their best in a difficult world. And over time, you lose access to the actual pattern, that maybe you're the common denominator in your repeated failures. Then there's confabulation, the mind's ability to fill gaps in memory or motivation with invented stories that feel real. You don't remember why you made a decision 5 years ago, so your mind creates a plausible reason. It feels like a memory. It has the texture of truth, but it's fiction generated on the spot to maintain narrative coherence. You're not remembering, you're creating, and you can't tell the difference. Self-deception starts as protection, but it becomes a cage. Consider the addict who genuinely believes they're in control, not the addict who's lying to others, the one who has convinced themselves they can stop anytime. They're just choosing not to right now. This week has been stressful. Once things calm down, they'll cut back. They don't have a problem. They have a temporary situation. This isn't manipulation. This is self-deception functioning exactly as designed. The truth, I'm addicted and my life is falling apart, is too threatening to the self-image. So the mind constructs an alternative reality and commits to it completely. Or consider the person in an abusive relationship who has reframed their partner's cruelty as passion, their control as care, their violence as proof of how much they're loved. They're not stupid. They're not weak. Their mind is protecting them from a truth too devastating to accept, that someone they love is harming them. Self-deception allows abusers to see themselves as victims. The person who screams at their partner has convinced themselves they were provoked. The parent who emotionally neglects their child has decided they're teaching independence. The friend who betrays you has rationalized that you betrayed them first. They're not lying. They genuinely believe their version. That's what makes it so dangerous. In the workplace, self-deception prevents growth. You can't learn from mistakes you can't acknowledge making. You can't improve skills you believe you've already mastered. You can't receive feedback from people you've decided are jealous, incompetent, or biased against you. The same patterns repeat. Projects fail. Relationships end. Opportunities disappear. But you never see your role because your mind has constructed an elaborate system of external causes. In relationships, self-deception is erosive. Your partner tries to tell you how your behavior affects them, but you've already decided they're too sensitive, or misunderstanding your intentions, or projecting their own issues. You can't hear them because hearing them would require acknowledging something about yourself that contradicts your self-image. So they stop trying, and you convince yourself the relationship ended because they weren't willing to work on it. Here's the paradox that makes self-deception so difficult to escape. The better you are at it, the more you need outside feedback. But self-deceivers are masters at dismissing feedback that threatens their narrative. The person tells you you're being defensive. Your mind instantly provides proof that you're not defensive. You're just explaining. They're the one who's being unreasonable by not accepting your explanation. See how it works? The mechanism defends itself by categorizing all challenges as attacks, all feedback as hostility, all alternative perspectives as evidence that others don't understand you. You're always the exception to the rule, always the victim of circumstances, always justified in your choices. And anyone who suggests otherwise simply doesn't have the full picture. Except they do. They have the picture you can't see because you're standing inside the frame. So how do you recognize self-deception in yourself? Start by noticing when your version of events differs dramatically from others' perspectives. Not occasionally, consistently. If multiple people over time describe your behavior in ways that don't match your self-perception, that's data worth examining. Notice when you have an explanation for everything that absolves you of responsibility. Life is complex. Sometimes you're at fault. If you can never find yourself at fault, your self-deception mechanism is working overtime. Notice patterns that repeat while your role in them remains invisible to you. The same type of conflict, the same type of failure, the same type of relationship ending. If the circumstances change but the outcome doesn't, you're the constant variable. Notice when feedback feels like an attack rather than information. When someone shares how your behavior affected them and your immediate reaction is to defend, explain, or counter-accuse, that's self-deception protecting itself. Notice when you're always the exception. Rules apply to others, but not to you, because your situation is special, your reasons are better, your constraints are more limiting. The path out of self-deception doesn't start with admitting you're a terrible person. It starts with admitting you're a person, capable of harm, capable of error, capable of holding contradictory beliefs, capable of acting from unconscious motives you don't understand. It requires building tolerance for the discomfort of cognitive dissonance instead of immediately resolving it. Sit with, I'm a good person and I did something harmful, without rushing to rewrite either half of that statement. It requires seeking feedback from people who care enough to be honest with you, then actually listening instead of explaining. Not because their perspective is automatically correct, but because your own perspective is automatically biased. It requires recognizing that your memory is not a recording device. It's a storytelling device. Every time you recall something, you're reconstructing it, and that reconstruction is influenced by your current needs and beliefs. It requires accepting that you don't always know why you do what you do. Sometimes the honest answer is, I don't know. That's more truthful than the plausible explanation your mind generates to fill the gap. Most importantly, it requires compassion for yourself. Self-deception isn't evidence that you're broken. It's evidence that your mind is protecting you the only way it knows how. You developed these defense mechanisms for a reason. They kept you safe when you needed them. But what kept you safe can also keep you stuck. The goal isn't perfect self-knowledge. That's impossible. The goal is reducing the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are, between the story you tell yourself and the impact you have on the world. Because here's what happens when you stop lying to yourself. You start seeing reality clearly enough to actually change it. You stop repeating patterns because you can finally see them. You stop damaging relationships because you can acknowledge your part in the damage. You stop stagnating because you can admit where you need to grow. The truth might be uncomfortable. It might contradict your self-image. It might require you to acknowledge harm you've caused or mistakes you've made. But it will also set you free from the exhausting work of maintaining the lie. Your brain has been protecting you from the truth. Maybe it's time to ask, what would happen if I could handle it?